My spouse deceived me about our child, keeping hidden the fact that he was from her former partner. Now she's accusing me of betrayal. I genuinely never imagined myself sharing something like this online. My existence seemed so ordinary, and I'd even been content. I had a wonderful wife, Emma, along with an 8-year-old son, whom I believed was the center of my universe. But now I'm here, seriously doubting everything I previously assumed about my family and my relationship. 2 weeks ago, I discovered my son isn't related to me by blood. And it's not just that revelation that's crushing me. It's the dishonesty associated with it. Let me provide some background and clarify how this all began. My brother gave me a DNA test kit as a gift last month for my birthday. He thought it would be an amusing experience, and to be honest, I did too. My family has always been really interested in tracing our roots, so I thought it would be interesting to uncover more about my lineage. I decided to order one for my son also, a nice little activity to bring us closer. We were going to compare results, maybe uncover some unusual details about our background. A few weeks passed and the results arrived. Initially, I didn't even see anything unusual. I was preoccupied with browsing my own family tree. It wasn't until I checked my son's results that I saw something unusual. There was no connection between us. Initially, I assumed it was merely a mistake in the system. These things aren't entirely correct, are they? But the more I reviewed it, the clearer it became that it wasn't just a simple technical issue. There wasn't a single shared DNA marker. I felt utterly stunned. I just sat there, my eyes glued to the display, and my thoughts were all over the place. Could it be they had somehow gotten the samples mixed up? Was there some kind of error during the testing? I desperately wanted to believe anything other than the obvious. Because if this was accurate, if this was the truth, it meant my son wasn't biologically connected to me. I didn't tell my wife right away. I had no idea how to even begin the conversation. For 48 hours, I kept it all a secret, trying to work out what the heck I should do next. Yet whenever I looked at my son, I felt this awful knot in my gut. How could I look him straight in the face and act like nothing was different when everything inside me was falling apart? Eventually, I couldn't handle it any longer. One evening, after our son was already asleep, I got Emma to sit down and I shared the DNA test information. I tried to remain composed and logical, but my voice wavered when I told her the outcome seemed impossible. I anticipated she'd be just as stunned as I was. I figured she'd say, "That's ridiculous, let's sort this out," but she didn't. At first, she just looked at me blankly. Then she let out this nervous giggle, as if she was trying to brush it off. She mentioned something about how those tests aren't always reliable and that perhaps I shouldn't take it so seriously, but I wasn't buying it. Her response seemed strange, like she was struggling to find a way to explain it but couldn't find the right words. So I pushed her further. I told her this wasn't something we could. I just couldn't let the matter go, so I directly asked her if there was something she hadn't revealed to me. That's when she completely lost it. Tears started streaming down her face, and I felt a terrible sinking feeling in my gut. Over and over, she kept saying she didn't know how to tell me and was afraid I'd leave. It took a solid 10 minutes for the words to finally come out, but when they did, it was like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. She confessed that our son isn't actually mine. He's her previous boyfriend's. I genuinely didn't know what to say. My mind was racing. I demanded to know when this happened, how it happened, and why she never came clean. She explained that when we began dating, she and her ex had only split a few months prior. She learned she was pregnant soon after we started getting serious, and instead of being honest, she decided to pretend the baby was mine. Her precise words were, "I knew you'd be a far superior dad." I felt completely floored. She had been deceiving me for 8 years, allowing me to believe the child was mine. She let me create my entire life around him, around our family, without ever giving me the opportunity to know the reality. And what about our son? He has no clue. He spent his whole life believing I'm his father. The revelation made me feel physically ill. I still feel awful. A part of me wanted to yell at her, but another part just felt completely vacant. I just left the room without uttering a sound and spent the rest of the night sitting in my car. I'm struggling to make sense of everything that's happened. It feels like I've experienced every emotion imaginable these last couple of weeks. I felt furious, heartbroken, and utterly betrayed. I keep running through the last 8 years in my mind, questioning if I overlooked any clues. Did she ever make a mistake? Did she ever show remorse? And now, what exactly am I supposed to do? Here's the thing, I love my son. He may not be biologically related, but he's my son in every important respect. I was there when he took his initial steps. I was also there when he spoke his first word. I showed him how to ride a bicycle. I've gone to every school play and every soccer game. He's my boy. Now, however, I'm constantly asking myself questions. Does this change anything at all? Is it supposed to? Then there's Emma. I'm not certain if I can ever view her the same way again. She was dishonest with me about something so significant, something that fundamentally impacts our family. How do you recover from something like that? Is recovery even possible? I haven't shared any of this with anyone yet. Not my friends, not my relatives. I have this feeling that if I say it out loud, it'll become real, and I'm not prepared for that. I'm not even sure if I should tell my son. Ought he to know? Does he have the right to know? Or would it only wound him more than it would help? The most difficult aspect of all this is, this could just be the beginning. The way Emma acted when I confronted her makes me suspect there's more she's withholding. But I'm not sure if I can bring myself to investigate further. At present, I'm just trying to determine what my next move should be. In my previous writing, I shared that I recently discovered my 8-year-old son isn't biologically related to me. My wife, Emma, confessed to deceiving me for 8 years, allowing me to believe he was my child when she knew he was actually the product of her relationship with a former partner. Since then, I've been overwhelmed with feelings, experiencing shock, the sting of betrayal, and deep sorrow. However, just as I felt I couldn't endure more pain, Emma took an action I never anticipated. She began trying to alienate my son from me. It seems like she realized she couldn't control me anymore, so she redirected her efforts toward our son. And the most difficult part of all is that it's actually working. To provide some context, after Emma revealed the truth, there were a couple of days where we hardly exchanged words. Each attempt at conversation devolved into an argument, and frankly, I was unsure how to even be in the same room with her. But I attempted to maintain normalcy for my son's sake. He had no clue what was happening, and I didn't want to involve him in the conflict. I thought, at the very minimum, we could both agree on sheltering him from the turmoil. But I was mistaken. It began subtly, almost so I wouldn't detect it initially. She would make little remarks when our son was nearby, like, "Your dad's been so irritable lately," or, "I guess your dad is too busy to spend time with you right now." At first, I didn't give it much thought because, well, I was irritable. I mean, honestly, how could I not be? But then it intensified. One evening, I was helping my son with his schoolwork when he unexpectedly turned to me and said, "Mom says you're upset with me because..." I completely messed up. I went blank. I honestly had no clue what to say in response. I then asked him to clarify his statement, and he responded with, "She told me you don't like me anymore because I'm not good enough." My heart felt like it was constricting as he uttered those words. I told him again that wasn't true, and I truly cared for him above all else. However, he just gave a dismissive gesture and stated, "That's not what Mom said." I was absolutely livid. Immediately after he went to sleep, I addressed Emma, and she played the part of being completely unaware. "I didn't say that," she declared, her voice oozing with feigned sympathy. Perhaps he had heard incorrectly, but it didn't stop. Over the following several days, my son began to act withdrawn around me. He would physically pull away when I tried to hug him, and he stopped asking me to play games with him, which was something he always did. When I tried to communicate with him, he would only provide me these brief, one-word responses, as if he no longer had faith in me. Then, one particular day, I eavesdropped on Emma talking to him in his room. She was oblivious to the fact that I was standing just outside the door, listening to their conversation. She was making statements such as, "You know, sometimes dads get angry when kids aren't perfect. And it's all right if your dad doesn't love you as much as he used to. I will always love you no matter what." I felt as though I was about to combust. How could she possibly say something like that to an 8-year-old child? She was instilling these thoughts in his mind, making him believe that I didn't love him. And for what purpose? To punish me for discovering the truth? To protect herself? When I confronted her. Finally, she stopped pretending. This time, she didn't try to say it wasn't true. Instead, she got even more aggressive. "You're the one who's messing everything up," she declared. "You're the one fixated on this DNA nonsense. Do you honestly believe he'd be better off knowing the facts? You're going to ruin his life." I was completely stunned by her words. She was behaving as though she was the one being wronged, as though I was the villain for wanting the truth. I told her her actions were underhanded and cold, but she simply chuckled. "You just don't understand," she stated. "You don't know what being a mother is like. I'm doing what's in his best interest." It was at that moment that I understood I had to shield my son, not just from the truth, but from her. From that moment, I tried to be more careful about how I related to him, making sure he knew how much I loved him, no matter what. Each day, I told him how proud I was of him and what a privilege it was to be his dad. Also, I started keeping a record of everything she said and did. I began tapping our fights, archiving texts, and writing down notes about the things she told our son. I wasn't certain what I was going to do with all of it yet, but I thought if this turned into a fight for custody, I would need evidence of her behavior. Then things got much worse. One day, my son came home from school looking really down. I asked him what was troubling him, and at first he didn't want to tell me. However, after some gentle encouragement, he eventually told me, "Mom said you don't want." I can't pretend to be my son's father any longer. I asked him what made him say something like that. He answered, saying Emma said I was upset because I'm not his real dad. Is that correct? I almost broke down right then and there. I told him, "Pay attention to me. You are my son and always will be. No matter what, nothing could ever change that." I held him in the tightest embrace I could give, and for a second he looked like he believed me. However, the harm was already done. Emma had gone too far, doing something I didn't even think was possible. She was exploiting the single thing I was most worried about, my son discovering the truth and using it to make him resent me. The truth is, I don't even think she worried about how it impacted him. She was so concerned with causing me pain that she didn't notice or didn't care that she was hurting him as well. I'm at a loss for what to do now. Part of me desperately wants to confront her, revealing all her falsehoods and ensuring my son learns the truth, but another side of me is scared of the effect that truth might have on him. He is just 8 years old. He shouldn't be forced to deal with this awful situation. The last thing I can say is that after everything Emma did, lying to me and turning our son against me, I understood. I couldn't just stay quiet and let her control everything. I began writing everything down. As I said in the previous post, plus I started my own investigation. Something about her attitude towards the DNA test continued to bother me. She seemed so defensive, so irate. It was like she was guarding a secret far bigger than the falsehood she'd shared with me. I couldn't dismiss the sense that there were hidden layers to this situation. So I took an action that I'd always believed I never would. I actually engaged a private detective. Initially, I experienced a pang of guilt, even contemplating it. This was, after all, the woman I had cherished for more than 10 years, the mother of my son, or the boy I'd raised as mine. But following all her actions, I realized I couldn't place my trust in her, and I absolutely needed the truth, not just for my sake, but for my son's. The detective started looking into Emma's past, specifically focusing on the period around the time we first started our relationship. I provided him information about her former partner, Daniel, whom she'd acknowledged as my son's biological father. I was determined to find out if he was still present in her life, whether she'd been communicating with him during all this time. A part of me hoped that learning more about him would perhaps guide me toward the next step. The things the investigator discovered completely astonished me. He confirmed that Emma had indeed kept in contact with Daniel. She'd been exchanging messages with him for a long period, sharing photos of our son and keeping him updated on his achievements. But here's the real shocker. Daniel had absolutely no clue that he was the father. Emma had never divulged that information. In every message, she always called our son my boy and behaved as if Daniel was simply an old friend she was chatting with. I couldn't process this at all. Why would she maintain communication with him, sharing these personal, intimate details about our child, but never revealing the truth? And then I was starting to ask myself, would she ever come clean to him? Was she keeping him as a sort of alternative? However, that wasn't even the most shocking revelation. The person looking into things uncovered another secret, something Emma had never shared with me. Prior to Emma and I becoming a couple, she and Daniel had been legally married, not just a casual relationship, but married. It wasn't a long marriage, lasting just around a year, however. They'd been together long enough that it had significance. She never once brought this up to me, not during all the time we'd spent together. I felt as if all the air had been removed from the space when I heard those words. Seriously, consider it. She allowed me to believe Daniel was simply a random ex-boyfriend from her history. She conveniently omitted the fact that he was actually her former husband. But hold on, it gets even more disturbing. The reason for the end of their marriage was because Emma had cheated on him. The person investigating found court documents indicating that Daniel had sought an annulment, pointing to an affair. It was hard for me to believe. I thought I knew her. I thought I understood the kind of person she was. But this was a part of her I had never even considered. When I challenged her about everything, she completely lost her composure. She accused me of betrayal for delving into her past. For bringing Daniel into it, she claimed I was trying to destroy her and wreck our family. But here's the real issue. I wasn't trying to damage anything. All I wanted was the truth. After all the falsehoods she'd told me. How could I possibly keep that secret? I admitted to her that I knew about her marriage to Daniel. I told her I was aware she'd been communicating with him and that she'd been sending him photos of our little boy. And then I posed the question that had been tormenting me. Why hadn't she ever told him he was the father? Her response: because I didn't want him to take my son away from me. I was completely shocked. She wasn't looking out for my best interests. She wasn't even thinking about our son's well-being. She was focused on herself. She wanted to be in charge, to make certain that no one else had any influence over what happened to our son. Not me, not Daniel, nobody. At that moment, I understood I couldn't depend on anything she said. Everything she said sounded like another deception, another effort to sway me. So I took action. I got in contact with Daniel. It wasn't an easy choice. I wrestled with the idea for several days, wondering if I was making a terrible blunder. But ultimately, it seemed right that he should be told the reality of the situation. I couldn't keep this hidden from Daniel, especially when it concerned something as important as his own child. When I spoke with Daniel, he was floored. He had no clue that Emma had been deceiving him all this time. He mentioned he had always wondered why she abruptly ended things with him, but he never suspected she was keeping a child a secret. He was angry, but not at me, at her. Currently, Daniel desires to be involved in his son's life, and frankly, I believe that's a good development. My son deserves to know his origins. I believe Daniel really should have the opportunity to be a parent. Although, I realize this is going to completely throw my life into even more chaos. Of course, Emma is furious. She's accusing me of betraying her, claiming I've destroyed everything. However, you know what? Frankly, I'm past the point of caring. She deceived me, she deceived Daniel, and she also deceived our child. She's been trying to manipulate everything for what seems like ages, and now the whole thing is just unraveling. I'm still in the process of determining what the future holds. I've already consulted with an attorney about custody arrangements, and I'm ready to battle for my boy if it becomes necessary. Because regardless of the consequences, I'm not abandoning him. He is my child. He's my son, regardless of our blood relation, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep him safe.